You're a long way from home, Cole. She's coming with me.
The gunshot cracked across the desert like thunder splitting the sky, and by the time the dust settled, a man's life had already changed forever. Rancher Nathaniel Cole had ridden out that morning to check on a broken fence line, never expecting to stumble upon a scene that would haunt him for the rest of his days. A young Apache woman, bound at the wrists, being dragged behind a wagon by three men who called themselves traders but were nothing more than thieves of human lives. If a story of courage, freedom, and second chances moves something inside you, take a moment right now to like this video, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, share it with someone who believes people deserve a second chance, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another tale from the Wild West. Nathaniel had seen cruelty before. The frontier bred it into men who forgot their own humanity out here where law was a rumor and mercy was scarce. But something about the way this woman held her head high, refusing to let her captors see her break, struck something deep in his chest. Her name, he would later learn, was Little Dove, daughter of a respected Apache elder, taken from her village during a raid meant to punish her people for refusing to give up their land without a fight. Nathaniel didn't consider himself a hero. He was a widower, a quiet man who had buried his wife Margaret 2 winters back after a fever took her, and since then he'd found comfort only in the silence of his ranch, the rhythm of his cattle, and the empty ache of a house that used to hold laughter. But when he saw those men strike Little Dove across the face for stumbling, something old and forgotten stirred inside him, a sense of right and wrong that refused to stay silent. He didn't think. He acted. Drawing his rifle, he called out a warning, and when the traders reached for their weapons instead of backing down, Nathaniel proved faster and steadier. 2 men fled into the brush, and the third lay wounded in the dirt, begging for mercy he hadn't shown his captive. Nathaniel didn't kill him. He simply told him to crawl back to whatever hole he'd come from and never show his face in this territory again. Little Dove said nothing at first. She simply stared at the stranger, unsure whether she had traded one danger for another. Trust did not come easily to her, and Nathaniel understood why. He untied her wrists gently, careful not to make any sudden movements, and offered her water from his canteen. It was a small gesture, but for a woman who had known only cruelty for weeks, it meant everything. He brought her back to his ranch, not as a prisoner, but as a guest, though he knew the town wouldn't see it that way. In 1870s Arizona territory, prejudice ran deep, and a white rancher sheltering an Apache woman was enough to draw suspicion, gossip, and outright hostility. The townsfolk whispered when Nathaniel brought supplies into town. Some refused to serve him. Others warned him he was inviting trouble, that Apache raids had cost families their lives and their land, and that he was a fool for trusting one of them. But Nathaniel had learned something that many in town had not, that fear and hatred often blind people to the truth standing right in front of them. Little Dove was not his enemy. She was a woman who had lost her freedom, her family torn apart by violence on both sides of a war neither of them had chosen. As the weeks passed, she began to help around the ranch, tending the garden, mending clothes, and slowly, cautiously, she began to speak. She told him of her village, of her father who likely believed her dead, of the mountains she used to call home before the fighting pushed her people further and further from the land that had always been theirs. Nathaniel listened. He didn't try to convince her that everything would be fine, because he knew it might not be. Instead, he offered her the one thing that mattered most, the choice to stay or to go whenever she was ready. Little Dove chose to stay, at first only because the road back to her people was dangerous and uncertain. But as the seasons turned, something deeper grew between them. It wasn't sudden or dramatic. It was built in quiet mornings feeding the horses together, in shared silences on the porch as the sun sank behind the mountains, in the way Nathaniel taught her to read from an old Bible and she taught him words in her own language, each of them slowly rebuilding pieces of themselves they thought were lost forever. Not everyone accepted this bond. A local rancher named Josiah Whitfield, a bitter man who had lost his brother in an Apache raid years before, made it his mission to drive Little Dove away. He spread rumors, tried to turn the town against Nathaniel, and one night even attempted to burn down Nathaniel's barn in a fit of hatred disguised as vengeance. Nathaniel caught him in the act, and rather than seeking revenge, he chose to hand him over to the territorial marshal, proving once again that strength was not found in cruelty, but in restraint and justice. That night, as the smoke cleared and the danger passed, Little Dove found Nathaniel sitting alone by the barn, exhausted but unbroken. She sat beside him without a word, and for the first time, she reached for his hand. It was a small gesture, but after everything they had endured together, it spoke louder than any words could. They married the following spring, in a quiet ceremony blending both their traditions, witnessed only by a handful of ranch hands and one elderly preacher named Thomas Whitaker who had come to respect Nathaniel's courage. Little Dove never forgot her people, and Nathaniel made sure she never had to. He helped her reconnect with distant relatives, welcomed her culture into their home, and together they raised a family that carried the strength and resilience of two worlds finally living in peace. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness can change a life. Your support means more than you know and helps this story reach others who need to hear it. Before we close this chapter, if you've made it this far, drop a comment below with just one word that describes how this story made you feel. We read every single one, and it means the world to see this community grow with each story we share. Years later, when their grandchildren asked how their family began, Nathaniel would simply say that sometimes the bravest thing a man can do isn't fight a war, but choose compassion when the world around him chooses hate. And Little Dove, now known to her family as Dove Cole, would smile and say that freedom isn't just being released from chains. It's finding a place where your heart is finally allowed to rest. Their story became a quiet legend of the Arizona frontier, a reminder that even in the harshest corners of the Wild West, love had the power to heal what violence had broken.